What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. Hi, Jason. How would you go about fixing the Pistons' free fall in the short term? Had a tough schedule, already back-to-backs, 4 games in 6 nights. Plus, the shooting depth has been decimated by injuries, so that explains part of the slide. However, I'm worried Monty's running Cade into the ground with high minutes and usage, plus refusing to play Ivy alongside him to alleviate ball handling / offensive initiation load, reflected in his fourth quarter shooting percentages. From watching their games, I believe whatever defensive improvement Monty sees with Killian starting over Ivy is negated by him being a complete scoring non-factor. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you think I'm onto something or just scared from, or just a scared fan, Monty's doghousing another top draft pick. So a couple things. First of all, with Cade Cunningham, it's not entirely uncommon for young players in particular to kind of fade at the end of games. It is when you've essentially professional perimeter defenders have now seen him for 3 quarters, and they just kind of like have a little bit better of an idea of how to kind of make things tougher for him in the end of games. Obviously, the physicality goes up a level as the refs swallow their whistles. Schematically, coaches will get more aggressive to slow him down. That's not unheard of. That's an important part of a player's development. Cade has to develop to the point where he can stay strong in fourth quarters. That is totally normal for a young perimeter ball handler, right? The thing with going with Killian Hayes as a starter, again, a lot of coaches look at it this way. You got to have a guy who's going to take your primary point of attack assignments, and it's not just one guy. Asar Thompson, I said to you guys a week and a half ago that I think he's potentially the best perimeter defender that I've scouted since I started scouting prospects 3-4 years ago. And obviously it's a short span, but he's the best that I personally have ever seen in my time doing this. But you play against these teams, there's usually 2 of them. And having Killian Hayes is just another guy in that lineup, because you got to think, you don't want Cade doing that, and you're running 2 bigs right now. So you need another guy that can guard the opposing secondary ball handler. And so that's kind of the direction they're going there. Again, I look at it, you mentioned short term. The short term, you're going to be bad. There's no fix for that. Maybe Bojan Bogdanovic comes back and what are you going to do? Move Asar Thompson to the 2 at that point, and now you have Killian Hayes and Jaden Ivey off the bench. I don't know how that works. Or does Bojan come off the bench? I don't know. But that's not solving your problems. And so you're going to be bad. So the question is, are you building towards something that is going to help you be good in the future? And what I look at there is positional compatibility. So for instance, let's look at the Thunder. And the Thunder are obviously much further along in this process. But when you look at them, it's Chet Holmgren, he's our rim protector, he's our 5. It's just that's pretty clear cut, right? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's our point guard. He's our superstar point guard, right? And then you go Josh Giddey, he's your secondary guard that complements Shai because he plays a different style and he's big, so he can play next to him, right? And then, you've got Lou Dort is a textbook 3-and-D player. That's perfect. And then Jalen Williams is a big slashing, scoring forward. And so all of them can play together, and that lineup is just super synergistic, and it just makes sense, right? But then I look at the Pistons, and it's the exact opposite. And it's okay, Jalen Duren's really, really good. I like Jalen Duren, but you're running a second big alongside of him. And, I get it. Isaiah Stewart's been hitting 3s this year. But at the end of the day, that's not a lot of ball handling up there. And we've seen this before where it's I have the same issue with the Timberwolves, but when you have that second big, there needs to be ball handling with that group, because it's less about can Isaiah Stewart knock down a catch and shoot 3, which he has been this year. It's more about against elite defenses when you're not, because when you play against an elite defense, you're not just running a pick and pop and getting a wide open shot. There's a rotation. And you've got to beat the team in rotation by making multiple drive and kick reads for a quality shot. And that's where aggregate ball handling in the lineup takes over. And that's where it's if Jalen Duren's your 5 and you've got 4 guys that can pass, shoot, and dribble on the floor, that's great. But if it's a second guy on there that can shoot but isn't a great, drive and kick guy, then it can start to kind of dip you below that minimum amount of ball handling, right? And then I go into the backcourt, and it's like Killian Hayes is a very different type of player than Jaden Ivey, but he's exciting in different ways, right? Like good defensive player, one of the best young playmaking guards that you'll see in the league in terms of taking care of the basketball and playing that, driving kick style, right? He flashes a lot of that in transition as well. But the thing is like Jaden Ivey plays the same position. Different player, like he's a downhill guy, like a rim pressure guy, and he's capable of being a good perimeter defender, but he isn't at this point, right? And I think even though Jaden Ivey has a long way to go as a shooter, he's a better shooter than Killian Hayes, right? So like at the end of the day, if those guys, if you start to look at the roster and you're like, okay, you need one of these centers to pan out, probably Jalen Duren, right? Cade's your point. You need a point of attack guard next to him. I like Jaden Ivey in the big picture more than Killian Hayes. So if it were me, I would look to move Killian Hayes, and I would lean more into Jaden Ivey. You do a disservice to both of them, though, when you put them in a situation like this where neither of them is getting as much opportunity as they need, and they're not playing with your best lineups, and all it really is doing is just kind of putting you in limbo even further, right? What you need to look at in the big picture is where Ausar Thompson fits in all of this. Let's say he's the 3, then you need a big picture 4 with this core, and you need a big picture 2 with this core. You've got 2 2s, and you kind of have 0 4s. Maybe if you had Sadiq Bey, maybe he slots in there, but clearly he didn't fit into that image anymore, right? So like at a certain point, you almost wonder if it's worthwhile for you to, look to move Killian Hayes for someone that you can slot between Ausar Thompson and Jalen Duren. That's more of a perimeter-oriented type of player. Like that's kind of the way I look at it, because like it's really easy. We're going to talk about this same type of issue when you get to the Cleveland Cavaliers, but like it's a lot easier to see the progression of a team into the future when they have their core 5 guys that are all kind of on the same timeline, that all kind of fit their roles perfectly, and they all can play together. And that's not the situation the Pistons are in. Like now, here's the upside, Pistons fans. Ausar Thompson, like I said earlier, is just an unbelievable defensive prospect. I pulled this stat up the other day for you guys, but he's averaging like 4 offensive rebounds and 2 blocks a game. Imagine that. He's turning 4 shot attempts by your team into extra shot attempts, and he's erasing 2 shot attempts from the other team. That basically means every game he's buying you 6 shot attempts. Now just run a basic equation like, based on your average half-court points per possession on both ends of the floor, it's going to be roughly a point. Let's call it 6 points. So Ausar Thompson, just on the glass and blocking shots, is adding 6 points to your team every game. In addition to just how disruptive he can be at the point of attack, how well he passes the ball just as a connective piece. He's a very, very exciting prospect there. So you've got Cade Cunningham, who has the potential to be a bona fide superstar, and you've got Ausar Thompson, who's got all the potential in the world, right? So you're in a really good spot in terms of like you're not like the Bulls, where you just don't have anything really to get excited about, but you've got a little bit of a redundancy in the backcourt and in the front court, and that eventually needs to get addressed. Next question. Do you think the Warriors' strong offensive rebounding isn't so much a team strength and more a result of how much other teams are selling out to the three-point line to stop their shooters? Very interesting question. But I think it's both. Like, Kevon Looney is genuinely an excellent offensive rebounder. He's just very strong, and he's good at leaning on people. So, like, he can bury even the best bigs in the league under the rim and get rebounds. But I looked this stat up to kind of prove this this kind of idea, though. Because, like, essentially the idea that this question is getting at is, like, is there a schematic thing that takes place with the Warriors that creates more offensive rebounded opportunities? Now, what we're looking at there is the defensive big has to show at the level of the screen. So the screener has an opportunity to get to the rim, right? To grab an offensive rebound if Steph puts up a shot, right? Imagine against the Celtics, Robert Williams in the finals, like steps up on a Steph Curry 3 in pick and roll. Steph misses it, but Looney's barreling downhill to get the offensive rebound. So that's schematic approach 1. And then the second part of it is like lots of 3-point attempts. The Warriors are a high 3-point attempt team. As a result, their field goal percentage is lower because 3s don't go in as often as 2s. They're a 45% field goal percentage team. That ranks 25th in the NBA. So they miss more shots than every team in the league except for 24 teams. Or except for 4 teams, 5 teams. So essentially, more missed shots and the actual defensive rebounder for the other team being pulled out to the 3-point line definitely helps a lot. Here's an example. Dario Saric is averaging a career-high 3.4 offensive rebounds per 36 minutes. His previous career high was 2.4. So there you go. I feel like that's pretty strong evidence that your theory that the Warriors and them forcing teams to sell out to the three-point line goes a long way towards helping them as a team offensive rebound better. In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score 150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub. They even have great same-game parlays. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. New customers can get 150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code HOOPS. The crown is yours. Hi, Jason. I'm curious on what do you think the Cavs should do moving forward? They're in a weird spot of contending and developing. I think it's clear Donovan is not good enough to be the guy on a title team. Knowing that that should the Cavs take the patient approach, you said the Celtics should. I'm a little confused by this. Hold on. Should they take this? I'm going to just skip that part. Should the Cavs take the patient approach and hope Mobley can be that guy, or should they eventually make an all-in trade and trade Garland and assets for the next available superstar who can be that guy? A couple things. I agree about Donovan Mitchell. I don't think he can be the best player on a championship team, but at the same time, it makes the most sense to keep him where he is. I definitely feel like Darius Garland is not that guy. Like Darius Garland, interesting young player. Don't think he's got superstar potential. Can Evan Mobley be a superstar? He's got that potential, but he feels very far away from that at this point. Offensively, he's a little below where he was last year. That's never encouraging. And his offensive shortcomings in the short roll ended up being a big problem for them in the Knicks series. If you move him to center, you're immediately going to go from pretty good to probably average fast, just because you become pretty small on that front line. Even though I think that's where he's going to be in the long term, it'd be a short-term sacrifice for a long-term benefit. So in that example, you're in a tough spot because what you really need to do is see what Mobley can become and then stay positioned to make potentially a star trade if it comes up in the future. And so I wanted to kind of pitch an example of a soft rebuild you could do that would make the Cavs better in the short term while also buying you the time to see what Mobley can do by making the team a little bit more compatible with each other. So here's an example. And again, these trades might be completely unrealistic, but hey, we're just having some fun. Number one, call up the Nets and see if you can work out a Garland for Mikal Bridges swap, okay? Essentially, that's a team that's heavy on 6'8" dudes that can shoot, right? They already have Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith, and Ben Simmons is hurt again, but theoretically he's another forward in that lineup, right? So you bring in a guard essentially for a team that right now basically has Spencer Dinwiddie and Cam Thomas at guard, and Cam Thomas got hurt as well. But they're a team that could use some more offensive initiation and organization. Darius Garland could help them there. I don't know if you need to throw in a draft pick. I'm not sure how those GMs value those teams, but Garland and Mikal Bridges, you swap those two guys. That essentially puts Mikal Bridges at the 3 and moves Max Strus to the 2, which is probably a better spot for him there. Okay. Then you call up the Bulls and you offer him Jared Allen for Nikola Vucevic. Once again, not sure how the GMs value those respective contracts. Not sure if you would need to throw in a pick here or there, but those are two trades that seem at least possible, right? You flip Allen for Vucevic. This is what the lineup looks like now. You have Donovan Mitchell with Max Strus, with Mikal Bridges, Evan Mobley, and Nikola Vucevic. Now, Evan Mobley is surrounded by 4 guys that can shoot, 3 of which are knockdown three-point shooters, right? They're not going to be as good defensively, but the spacing is going to be much better. Again, you kind of do a similar type of thing that we were talking about with the Lakers with Christian Wood and Anthony Davis. You basically put Vucevic as the help side defender guarding the low man, and you have Mobley defend and pick and roll. That kind of allows you at least a decent chance of defending at a high level. And then again, maybe you're not as good in the regular season, but I think you're a little better in the playoff context. And then you just let Evan Mobley develop in a spaced out environment, see what he's capable of. And then in 2 years, you can find out whether or not he's on that track or not. And most importantly, those are, those are 2 deals that don't empty your asset trove. And so you can still kind of hang tight and wait to see if a better deal comes up down the line for a star. Next question. As good as the Celtics starting five looks this season, the bench has been going through their ups and downs. Do the C's need to concentrate on the roster and look on this roster, or look to strengthen it by adding a piece or two via trade before the deadline? I'm not worried about the perimeter depth at all. Obviously the bench hasn't produced a lot offensively, but at the same time, the starting five is so talented and they can stagger things properly that they always have 2 or 3 excellent players on the court. With their top 6, like at any given moment, you're going to have 6, you're going to have at least 2 or 3 excellent players on the floor. So like, I'm not really worried about that. The main thing for me would just be the center position and what would happen if Horford or Porzingis went down in their lack of depth at that position. So do I think they need to keep an eye on, a potential center down the line? Yes, but the roster is not going to be an issue for this Celtics team. It's going to be about the guys in that group and what they can accomplish. Do you think if Cam Reddish can keep doing this well, does he help the Lakers in the long run? In the playoffs. So here's the thing. Cam Reddish is playing better. He's defending at the point of attack well. He's finding a way to impact winning for the Lakers, which is an excellent shout out to Cam Reddish and his mental fortitude through what's been a challenging couple of years and just scraping and clawing his way into a rotation spot, right? Like that's all very impressive. Here's the reality. If Cam Reddish is in your playoff rotation, you're probably not very good. Like that's just the reality. Cam Reddish has knocked down a bunch of important corner threes the other day, in that Suns game. That goes without saying. But overall, offensively, it's been pretty rough with Cam Reddish, and the perimeter defense has been good but not great. What you really need for the Lakers is you need an excellent version of Cam Reddish. You need a top tier 3-and-D guy. You need somebody that can legitimately cause problems consistently at the point of attack while also maintaining a threat offensively. That's why I keep pointing towards that Alex Caruso option. I just think he makes the most sense in the world as a guy that they should try to hunt. What do you think of Wemby so far this season? Do you think he's a strong candidate for Rookie of the Year? Yes, he's going to get Rookie of the Year. If you look down the line, there's just nobody that's having a more impressive season. Chet, obviously, more of a winning context, but Wemby's just even within that context, I think he's been a more impressive player this year. Couple things have clearly screamed off the screen as weaknesses early on. Being strong with the ball. Whenever he goes up against a good forward defender, they just are really good at identifying the times that Wemby gets loose with the ball and they just swipe down and knock it away. He's not very good at setting screens. That's something that he's definitely going to have to get better at over the years if he wants to create openings, not just for himself, but for his guards. But that's all classic young guy stuff. And like his jump shot's still super inconsistent. That's a classic young guy thing as well. All these things I think are going to get rectified over the years. Being a longtime subscriber, I've noticed you always put the recent Finals MVP as your best player in the world moving into next season. Could you ever make a case one year that another player that didn't win the championship the previous year could be the best player in the world in front of the person who won the chip and Finals MVP? So obviously weird Finals MVP selections like Kawhi in 2014 or Andre Iguodala in 2015 are examples where you're obviously not going to call them the best player in the world. The other thing too is like I'm just going to start keeping separate lists now, and in the vacuum list and then the like actual trophy award ceremony, whatever, bragging rights list, right? Like I got in all this trouble with Mavericks fans for having Luka at 10 and like, do I think Luka's the 10th best player in the world? No, but my list is like, it's a bragging rights list. Who has the, Bill Simmons calls it the championship belt, right? Like who has the championship belt? And I like that concept from the standpoint of like, to me, winning should matter. And so if I win the trophy and I win Finals MVP, I should get to be at least respected as the best player in the world that year, even if you might not think that I am, right? Like that's kind of the way that I think that should work. So again, like I think the way you address the other end. So I'll give you an example. Steph won Finals MVP in 2015. I do not think he was better than LeBron. I think LeBron was clearly a better player than him at that point. And if I went into the next season in a vacuum, LeBron's the best player in the world. But if that same situation happened today, I would be like, yeah, but you kind of got to give Steph the respect within the scope of the regular season as like he's got the belt, so to speak, right? Even if in a vacuum you would take LeBron over him. That's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. Do you expect Jordan Poole to improve as the season goes over? I understand he's running his team for the first time, but he's averaging 16 points per game on 40% from the field and 30% from three. Couple things. First of all, I haven't watched a full Washington Wizards game this year, so I don't want to talk profoundly about that team because I just don't know what I'm talking about. That said, what happens when you go from being a sixth man that's playing alongside a superstar and is pretty far down on the scouting report, playing a lot of your primary scoring minutes against bench groups, to suddenly you're at the top of the scouting report and you're the guy that like the other team's putting their best point of attack defender on from the start of the game. Like, it just gets harder to play. And in general, I think like, Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma and the rest, like they're all getting roasted right now, and for good reason. They've put together a highlight reel of kind of embarrassing moments to start the year. There was one of them going around this morning on Twitter that was funny. But at the end of the day, like they as a team have to make a decision. Do they want to be serious or not? And I think that'll go a long way towards both of those players and their development in the long run. Like, does Jordan Poole just want to have his own team and put up shots, or does he want to become the best basketball player that he can be? Because if that's the case, I think it's going to be a little bit more serious down the line. But it's early, guys. Like, it's only been like 10 games. So I want to give those guys more time before we just immediately characterize them as one thing or the other. All right, last question, then we'll get out of here. How did you get on with Colin? Did you graduate with a journalism degree or have a pod and take off that Colin saw and then he reached out? So I'll give a really brief version of this just so you guys know. Here's the thing. Like, there are, in the old days, that was what you did. You got a journalism degree and you started writing you got on as like an intern at some journalistic entity, and then eventually you got an opportunity to write occasionally, and then you started writing full-time, and maybe you parlayed that into a podcast or a radio appearance or something like that. And then on the radio front, it was like you'd go into the radio station and you'd work the control board, and then maybe you'd get to fill in for a guy on a Saturday and do 3 hours, and then maybe the producer or the big shots like you and they put you on, the next time there's a vacancy somewhere else, or you go to some other station. But I didn't have the time to do either of those. Like, obviously I had bills to pay and responsibilities, and I'm married, and my wife and I had a house and at the time, and so like I had no choice but to make it work and to earn money in the meantime. So basically for me, I sold real estate to make a living, and then I, on the side, did all of this stuff at home. And essentially, like, I'm very thankful that we live in this day and age, because if I had the exact same set of circumstances 10 years ago, I literally would never have been able to do what I do for a living. And I'd probably still be either working in corporate America or selling real estate. The advantage here is like the current set of tools that are available made it so that I could pursue this as basically a hobby. And then once the show had success, the volume reached out to me in my direct messages. I didn't do anything. They just reached out to me. Now, we had a lot of success when I was starting, when I was doing State of the Lakers with Raj, but like at the end of the day, like if they just straight up came out and contacted me through direct messages. Now, the way that this works, this is the best advice that I can give. Like, these companies, they have people constantly searching for quality content creators. They're out there looking. The tools you have available right now at home are capable of getting you exposure. YouTube has a built-in algorithm. TikTok has a built-in algorithm. Instagram has a built-in algorithm. Twitter's algorithm sucks, but it's there. Like, if people retweet or like your tweets, they'll get shown to other people. So like, there are tools that are available for free. There are podcast hosting platforms that are free. Spotify for podcasters, completely free. That's where I host the Two Sons podcast that I do with my buddy Luke. So like I'll give you the Two Sons podcast as an example. That's a podcast I don't get paid for. I'm building it from scratch, from the ground up. It's a different vibe. It's me and my buddy Luke. We talk about things that are not basketball, including Star Wars and other current events and stuff like that. And like, we record a show and I upload it to a podcast feed for free. I upload it to my YouTube channel for free. I cut clips of it and put it on social media for free. And from there, it will grow organically if it is quality content. And like, those algorithms are a meritocracy in the sense that like, when people watch, it gets automatically recommended. So your average watch time, your ability to retain an audience, is directly responsible for promoting the content elsewhere, right? So like, you have tools at home. That's what I did, and it allowed me to do that while I was earning a living elsewhere. Then I basically slowly phased out of real estate when I was doing this full-time. Now I'm at a position where I can afford to do this full-time, and now I can actually give it my best effort, which is where I'm at right now. But again, like, I think if there's one last piece of advice I'd give on that front, the downside of having it be that easy and having all these free tools is that you basically there's just kind of a sensory overload, so to speak. There's just a lot of people that are producing content. And as a result of that, like, it's harder to stand out. And so do it, but give it your best. Don't be lazy about it, because if you are, the people that aren't will naturally kind of float to the top. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of perspective. If you have questions surrounding that sort of stuff, don't hesitate to drop it in the YouTube comments, and I'll continue to kind of expound upon that in the coming weeks.